got another one of them.
Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. I didn't record last night. I decided I'd go live this morning. We have some things to cover with the pistol brace amnesty rule. If you didn't know, there was an amnesty when they introduced the pistol brace ban, the ATF that is. And we're halfway through. They gave us 120 days to figure out whether we were going to comply, register our firearm, destroy it, or make our firearm compliant. So, in the last couple of days, I've had one of my really good friends and brewer friends who hit me up, and I was actually surprised. He's kind of taking care of some stuff, and this was a question he asked me. He doesn't own any of these things, but that's what was surprising for me, was that he doesn't own a pistol. But he had asked me what's going on with the rule, and I was catching up with him anyway. And then my brother Ronnie, who loved to death, who was just asking some questions because he was seeing some things in some gun stores that he didn't understand what the hell was going on. And that's what led me to think about, this is something we should probably talk about. And plus I want to talk about the Red Guard that has formed in Tennessee that has marched on the Capitol there, because I think that's an issue that James Lindsay hit on the head when he called it the Red Guard. So first off, there are two cases that are going on. There's Texas versus the ATF, which the GOA is a member of that suit also. And the one most importantly is Firearms Regulatory and Account Coalition v. Garland. Now, what is important about these two cases? The first case is for an injunction, a temporary injunction that will go nationwide if it was brought by the Texas State Attorney General, who's very based and very cool. You should check out the news and why it matters, because he's been on there a couple times. And he's talked about how he uses his office to fight for the people of Texas, but more importantly, the people of the United States. His is an injunction that would actually stop them from enforcing this rule at the 120-day mark, and has a very good potential with enough teeth that could possibly stop it from going nationwide, period. Now, the one that is more interesting to me, though, and only because I'm not a lawyer, I check out some stuff. Washington Gun Law is who I use for a lot of the sources for this stuff, because he is a lawyer, and he's very pro 2A. And he mentioned this last one, the Firearms Regulatory Account one, versus Garland. And the reason why this is important is because North Dakota's Attorney General has raised this suit, and there are 26 other state attorney generals, those freer states that aren't behind the blue wall like New Mexico is. Their attorney generals have signed on to have this stopped completely, or an injunction completely against this. Now, why is that important? 26 states is over half the union. That shows one of the things we had to learn a long time ago was common use. And common use usually relates to how many people have them. Now, for a pistol brace, there's up to 40 million people right now that have had these, because it's been legal to own them for 10 plus years. And now they're all going to be felons if this gets carried out. Now, if you don't know what you can do to comply, first off, you can remove your brace, and you can, if you have an AR pistol, you can install what's considered an old-fashioned pistol tube. It's a smooth tube. This is what my brother had seen on the wall in Albuquerque, just going around his business and going to a gun store and seeing these on the wall, and he made the mistake of calling them an SBR. And he was like, the gun counter guy said, no, they're not SBRs, and that didn't jive with what my brother had asked or was thinking, so he called me. I don't know how I've become such an expert on some things, but I guess I'm a little smarter on some things and a little more informed than others. And my brother, my family in particular, counts on me to be abreast of these type of things, and always have, so that we don't end up in trouble with the law. Now, here's what was funny about that is the guy said, no, those aren't SBRs, those are pistols. My brother had asked, well, what the hell is this thing, and why is it different than someone with this brace? And I said, because he has friends that has braces. And I told him, the simple fact is that brace, the piece that you'd actually use to make it more usable, the firearm to be more usable, is now being challenged. In Dan's case, he was more so wondering, or my brewer friend, he was more so concerned about what are the odds this is going to go down for. You know, what are we looking down the path of? How did we lose this right? Even though I don't really care because it didn't really affect me, but it sucks to see this crap hit everybody else because I know there's a ton of people that have these, and he's not wrong in that statement. And I told him I think it's going to be nil, and here's the reasons why. These cases, this one, Firearms Regulatory Account Coalition versus Garland, with 26 people. Again, that's half the union. State attorney generals who signed on and said, no, we're going to raise a court case. The other one I would actually want to mention is what's happening in the House. And the House has a set of representatives who've actually called on the ATF and have put up their own, I think it's called an amicus case, where they've said, hey, you don't have the power to do this without the power of the purse. You are making executive fiat without going through Congress, and that is not how this works in the United States. And they're 100% correct too. So we're 60 days into the amnesty. What does that mean? It means we should probably not be worried about this, and it is still a chance to get a free SBR if you own one of these items and you follow the rules. You can probably get away with that. But what bothers me about this is the amount of information that the ATF is wanting. That's why they're wanting you to register these as short barrel rifles, is they want the information of where these items are. And throughout history, anytime there's ever been a registry of firearms, it has never turned out good. The prime example you can look at that is not Weimar Germany in 1940s and 1930s. What they did to the populace there. An unarmed populace will have to comply because they have no choice. They cannot stand against the regime. Now, again, I've talked about not being Rambo and how your odds against facing the regime if you came to an actual shooting match, probably not pretty good, especially if you're alone in this. And I don't believe you'll be alone in this, but I also don't believe that violence is the answer for where we're going with this. I think we can win even in this environment if we use the letter of the law, because the letter of the law still has steps that people have to obey. And whether they're corrupt or not, we can debate, and we can still say that this has to come up against some people that actually may have some moral character and say no. And in the court cases, if you look at what's happened in the last year with the wins we've had with concealed carry, congratulations all you guys in Florida who just now have permitless concealed carry, constitutional carry. It was up on our ballot, not our ballot, but it was up for a bill in the Roundhouse this last session, and it failed. And it failed because there was a hard push for gun control because of what's been going on and how gun incidents have been amplified in the media to hype up the frenzy around what's been going on in the world. Washington Gun Law, the guy that's in charge of that, he says he's going to wait. After 60 days, he's going to wait till 90 days to see if, what the odds of these 2 cases or these 4 cases that are actually introduced into the registry to be heard. And they are going to be heard one way or another because there needs to be some sort of remedy to this situation. Now, what do I believe? I personally believe that they cannot go and try to find 40 million of these And I think there's going to be a low level of complaints anyway, because they've kept chipping away at this, kept pushing away at this. And unlike the bump stocks that were originally banned and then that ban was repealed and stopped because there was litigation that had to go in there probably is not even going to be 4 or 5 of these that are turned in. The numbers for the bump stocks that were actually turned in or destroyed aren't official. So we don't know how much or how wide the compliance was. Now, the bump stock, this was a Trump era bull crap, and it's one of the biggest beefs I've had against the Orange Man, is that he tried to do this with executive fiat, and it was decisively dealt with now. And now they're going after quote-unquote ghost guns and pistol braces because they see this as the easy, low-hanging fruit that people will just accept, that they're going to let you do this and they will just comply. And if we've noticed anything in the last 3 years, we've noticed that there's a lot of people that are rising up and dissenting and not complying with government mandates. And I think that's where we're at as a society. We have cultists who take, horrific shootings like the one that happened a little bit ago in Nashville, and the one I had to deal with in Aztec, and they amplify these to the state that they whip up the cultists who aren't informed, one, and number two, only see guns as a bad thing. You even have people like David Hogue right now trying to show off that he knows how to shoot, and he's doing it in the most boomer FUD way possible with like skeet shooting type stuff. And while I think everyone who skeet shoots should enjoy their sport, it is by and large not the tactical community. The tactical community, I like what Colin Noir said about David Hogue, is you're doing it the most boomer FUD possible way to show that you're a gun guy or know something about guns, when in reality you're just showing your ass and not showing that you're capable of doing any of this stuff. It'd be more impressive if you did any of your shooting with an AR-15. But that would take away from his points of, his clout, his internet clout. David Hogue, if you don't know who he is, he's one of the guys that came out after the shooting in Florida, in the Parkland shooting, and he claims he was a student there, and that he was there at the time of the shooting. It came out later that he wasn't actually on the site. He had actually came to the site to basically get clout and to virtue signal. That's what I was looking for, the virtue signaling of what the left does all the time with this stuff. To that end, the Soros-funded crowd, that type of weird leftist cultists that are really ill-informed about the situations in the world, they actually started a protest in Tennessee for more gun laws. And they did so in a fashion that looks very reminiscent of the Chinese Red Guard going in and disrupting the Tennessee, their version of our roundhouse in New Mexico. So it's the House and the Senate, the State House and Senate in Tennessee. And they disrupted it. They raised all kinds of hell. They're trying to demonize us in the 2A community so that we are baby killers. But we are nothing of the sort. We've only ever demanded that we actually come in and have kids get help, or that we protect our kids. And we've advocated for years to have a couple of teachers maybe, or a couple guards maybe, that are armed on campus because, well, why don't we do this? It makes sense because we guard money, we guard anything of value with guns. And there is nothing more valuable than our kids. And it sucks to see that. And I mean, I worked in that environment. You work in that environment, you realize you're a can of tuna, and you're at the mercy of law enforcement if you are a law-abiding, complying person. And there's a hell of a lot of training that should be involved if you're going to be around kids with guns. And I agree with one of the other statements I saw of Iraq veteran 8888 said this. Make them get the training, if they're going to carry a gun around a kid, that an air marshal would have. And I've said that before, because an air marshal, the training you'd have to be around kids, you need to be very precise with your shooting. You need to be very responsible with your shooting. You need to be very aware of your surroundings and what you're capable of, and be trained up to that level. I don't believe you should force teachers to do this. I do believe teachers should be allowed to do this. And I also believe that they ultimately have the right to do this. My problem is I've worked in K-12 long enough, back in the Gap, that I've met some of these teachers that I do not feel comfortable around them ever having that opportunity. These are some of those 2% of the people that I talked about, or 1 or 2% of the people, some of them are, that I met that are brilliant, but absolutely do have no business around firearms. They're delightfully incompetent when it comes to this type of thing. And this is where we're going as a society. The society isn't getting any kinder. If you look around what's going on in the news, these riotous leftists, the ones that are coming out and doing what they're doing, they're not necessarily people I would trust my safety to. And I mean that because if you look at what they're willing to do, these people are willing to perpetrate violence on other people to get their way. And that's not how the American idea has ever been espoused or explained to me, is that we should not be, my side is 100% right, so let me enforce that with guns. But if you think about what it means, we've kind of always been that society in one way. The government has a monopoly of violence right now. And I don't believe that they should ever have that monopoly, and I don't think our founding fathers ever wanted them to have that monopoly, and that's why they made the 2A part of our Bill of Rights. It's not just to defend ourselves against, what is in the world, our society right now, but it was actually to keep the government in check. Remember what has happened after during the Revolutionary War, or right before the Revolutionary War. It took years to get to that point. And it was a tax on tea, but a 3% tax, but it was also a tax on, not a tax, a prohibition on firearms. There was a point during the Revolutionary War, where they came to confiscate arms. And this set up and sparked part of the Revolutionary War. Where are we now in today's society? We have one side who are cultists, who will not listen to facts, who will not listen to arguments, who do not care. They want their pound of flesh, and they want it now, and they are willing to do, say, or perpetrate any act to do it. They'll lie. David Hogg's a good way to look at that. You'll see these people like Moms Demand Action, who aren't from the area where these incidents do happen, but will shuttle themselves around. These activists in the 2A have been doing this for years. That's what led to me thinking that they're part of those Antifa guys that do the travel around to riot or protest, and they're not really protesting, they're rioting. They call this a diversity of tactic. And what they mean is to be as violent as you possibly can, because if we're the squeakiest, brokenest will, they'll have to listen to us. And that's not what should be allowed. To that end, we have to now become the broken, squeaky will that stands up and says no. And we have a problem on our side, is a little more conservative, where conservatives tend to not be as active or not willing to go to the mat and win on issues that matter. Now, that being said, that is starting to change, and that's because of what's happening to kids. Protecting kids, because conservatives usually have more families than leftists. And that means that they're going to take their family a little more serious and be willing to protect them more. To that end, they need to. The line has been drawn in the sand for years now, and if I've been in the 2A fight, I think since 2017 is when I started New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union as a protesting organization arm to try to protest what was happening in New Mexico. Because after the school shooting, immediately there were calls. After the school shooting in Aztec specifically, immediately there were calls for more gun restrictions, more gun confiscations, more gun laws that actually don't affect the issue. We're seeing, with all the stuff that's going down in our country, a total shift in our culture. And we have a generation or two now that have been whipped up into a frenzy with fear about that they're going to die at any time by some gun-toting maniac, where they think that this is going to be an act where the guy comes into a school or a gun-free zone, because gun-free zones work so well, right? That they think that that is what the solution is for everything, to make everything a gun-free zone. Well, the fact of the matter is, gun-free zones, all these mass shooting events and mass casualty events happen in areas where no one can legally carry themselves to protect themselves. So you've effectively given a soft target or a target of opportunity to a mentally unstable person. And if you've noticed lately, there are more and more mentally unstable people. These people going to protest and just standing and screaming and not being able to be talked to, or not being able to be said, hey, listen, your concern is valid. Here, let's talk about this. Instead, they're like, no guns. It's the guns, it's the guns, it's the guns. If you look at the American history we've lived in, the world we've lived in the United States, since its founding, there were probably more gun owners throughout its history than there are now. I don't mean about the population, I mean percentage. That everybody back in the day, the frontier days specifically, had firearms either to put food on the table or defend themselves against animals or defend themselves against whatever bad dude that they saw at the time. Fast forward that to the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. Everybody's household still had firearms. It became taboo at some point to own a firearm for some people, right after the hippies came back from Vietnam, or protested Vietnam, didn't come back from Vietnam. Because the guys I know that went to Vietnam are all keeping their guns. Let's just say that. So that anti-war, anti-violence sentiment, which is a very wholesome idea at its heart, was corrupted and pushed. And then we had a president like Reagan who came in and had heard about all the violence and the drug war and everything else, and how there was so much bad on the street and that there was a war on the street. In reality, fully automatic firearms have never really been an issue. There are 2 or 3 cases I know of that I can think of where people had converted their guns after the NFA to use fully automatic weapons. One of them was the one in California, and one of them was the one in Florida, where these guys went nuts, and I think they were both bank robberies, and they went awry. The one in California, they actually had to raid a gun store to get firearms to stop the threat, which initiated more of the militarization of the police force. And the police force militarization makes sense. As gang members and gangbangers, weapons evolved and weapons got more modern. They were outgunned carrying a 6-gun, a revolver in a caliber of .38 to need something with more capacity, the 9 millimeters, the 40s, the 45s. This is where all that stuff started coming into play. Now, that's where things changed. We now see cops looking a lot more like soldiers and having access to even more firearms or more deadly weapons than I think that they should have access to. I don't believe militaries, or not militaries, that's kind of what the law enforcement guys are becoming. I don't believe law enforcement should have access to 240 Bravos. I don't believe they should have access to Mark 19s. I realize a Mark 19 can use less than lethal munitions for riots and riot control. That makes a little more sense to me, but at the same time, you change the ammunition and now you have something that can cause a hell of a lot more damage to a hell of a lot more people in the hands of people that are willing, openly and willingly able to oppress you. And there was a point in time, like I said, when I was more of a statist, that I never thought I would see law enforcement. No, they won't turn that on the populace. After COVID, I kind of see that they probably could. And that means that I no longer want them to have that ability without me to have that ability to stop them, or someone in the community to have that ability to stop them. Because crew-served weapons serve no purpose in an agency that it can deal violence upon my person or the populace's person, that without having a counter. And that's what the Second Amendment has always been about. And the more we see these riots, and I suspect there's going to be, or these, I say riots, these protests, to me they echo of riots. It's going to take one bad actor to start something, and the rule of the riot usually is one or two people do something stupid and everyone else follows. And that they foster those people that are trying to quote-unquote protest in their diversity of tactics, lends credence to what they're doing there and why they try to escalate that level of violence up. And with what's happening today or this week with Trump being indicted, again, not a huge fan of the guy. I'd like to see everyone have their day in court and see what happens from that, and we'll see what happens from here. And I say this stuff because there's a potential that there are people that have had enough and seeing Trump, who's the avatar for a lot of people of what's going wrong and right in society, that I can see two opposing sides finally getting to the point where they're going to do something really, really bad. So these are my thoughts on the pistol brace and where it stands. I got rid of all mine, not because I wanted to comply, more so that I realized that I don't like pistol braces, and that this keeps to being a issue that is wishy-washy. I have an MP5, but it is in the configuration that it came from the factory. It is still a pistol. So, like, share, subscribe, most importantly, be great.